The gathering storm. The Nexus station stretched across space like a crystal flower blooming in the darkness. Its transparent walls caught the light from 3 different suns, casting rainbow patterns on the curved surfaces. Inside the main assembly hall, representatives from 57 different species gathered for one of the most important meetings in galactic history. The hall itself was a marvel of engineering, with atmospheric zones carefully controlled for each species' needs. Some areas glowed with heat for silicon-based life forms, while others bubbled with liquid methane for the aquatic races. Colonel Sarah Martinez stood at the entrance, taking in the sight before her. She had seen many impressive things during her 25 years of military service, but nothing quite like this. Beings that looked like walking trees sat next to creatures made of pure energy. Insectoid aliens with 6 arms gestured wildly while talking to what appeared to be living crystals. The noise was incredible. Dozens of different languages mixed together, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, roars, and electronic sounds that hurt her ears. Sarah adjusted her dress uniform, making sure every metal was perfectly aligned. The dark blue fabric was crisp and clean, bearing the insignia of Earth's Stellar Defense Force. Her boots were polished to a mirror shine, and her silver hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. At 52 years old, she had earned every decoration on her chest through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. The scars on her hands told stories of battles fought in the darkness between stars. Dr. Elena Vasquez hurried over to meet Sarah at the entrance. Elena was Earth's chief diplomat, a brilliant woman who had spent the last decade trying to secure humanity's place in the galactic community. She looked nervous, constantly checking her tablet and adjusting her glasses. Colonel Martinez, "Thank goodness you made it," Elena said, her voice tight with stress. "I was worried your transport might be delayed. This hearing is crucial for our future." Sarah nodded, studying the massive hall. "I can see that, Dr. Vasquez. Quite a gathering. Where exactly am I supposed to sit during these proceedings?" Elena's face fell slightly. "Well, that's been a bit of a challenge. You see, only full Federation members are allowed seats in the main assembly area. As observers, we've been assigned to the standing section in the back." Sarah followed Elena's gesture to a small area at the rear of the hall. A handful of beings stood there, mostly servants, guards, and other non-voting observers. The space was clearly meant to keep unimportant visitors out of the way. None of the alien representatives even glanced in that direction. "I represent all of humanity's military forces," Sarah said quietly. "And I'm expected to stand with the hired help?" "I know it's insulting," Elena replied, "but we have to play by their rules if we want membership. Once Earth is accepted into the Federation, you'll have proper status and recognition." Before Sarah could respond, a towering figure approached them. Ambassador Thane Corvin of the Saurix. Empire stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled skin a deep emerald green. His yellow eyes fixed on Sarah with obvious disdain. The Saurix were one of the oldest spacefaring races, having conquered their first solar system when humanity was still discovering fire. "So this is the human military representative," Corvin said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. "How quaint. I was expecting someone more impressive." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Colonel Sarah Martinez, Earth Stellar Defense Force. And you are?" "Ambassador Corvin, representing the interests of 17 star systems and 43 inhabited worlds," he replied with obvious pride. "I trust you understand your place in today's proceedings. Observers remain silent unless specifically asked to speak." "I understand perfectly," Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. Corvin's lipless mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "Excellent. Perhaps your species is more trainable than I initially thought." He turned and walked away, his heavy footsteps echoing through the hall. Elena grabbed Sarah's arm. "Please don't let him provoke you. We've worked too hard to get this far." Sarah watched the Saurix ambassador return to his prominent seat near the center of the hall. "Don't worry, Doctor. I know how to follow orders, but I also know when someone is testing my patience." As they made their way to the observer section, Sarah noticed how the seating was arranged. The most ancient and powerful species occupied the inner circle, their chairs elevated and ornate. The Altarians, beings of pure thought who had existed for millions of years, sat in seats that seemed to be made of crystallized light. The Vorthan Collective, a hive mind that controlled 1/3 of the galaxy's trade routes, occupied a section that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Moving outward, the newer or less influential species had smaller, simpler seats. Even the youngest Federation members had proper places to sit and voices in the proceedings. Only the observer section at the back offered no seating at all. "The irony is not lost on me," Sarah muttered as they reached their assigned area. "Species that have never fought for anything beyond their own borders get to sit in judgment of those who have." A melodic chime rang throughout the hall, signaling the beginning of the session. High Counselor Vexithara materialized at the center. Podium, her form shifting between solid matter and pure energy. She was older than most civilizations, having witnessed the rise and fall of countless empires. "Honored representatives," Vexithara's voice resonated directly in every being's mind. "We gather today to consider the application of the human species for full membership in the Galactic Federation. This decision will determine whether Earth and its colonies may join our community of worlds." A ripple of conversation spread through the assembly. Sarah could hear snippets of different languages, but the universal translators made the meaning clear. Most of it was not flattering to humanity. "Do they even have colonies?" asked a delegate from the crystalline Xerion Consortium. "3 mining outposts, I believe," replied another voice. "Hardly an empire worth considering." Vexthara raised her hand for silence. "The human delegation has requested this hearing based on their contributions to galactic security and their potential for growth within our community. Dr. Elena Vasquez will present their case." Elena stepped forward, her presentation materials glowing in her hands. "Honorable Counselor, esteemed delegates, I come before you today to speak for all of humanity. We may be a young species, but we have already shown our commitment to peace and cooperation among the stars." She activated a holographic display showing Earth's achievements, the lunar colonies, the Mars terraforming project, the asteroid mining operations in the outer system. For a human audience, it would have been impressive. In this room full of beings who moved planets and built ring worlds, it looked like a child's science project. "Our population of 12 billion represents a significant addition to Federation demographics," Elena continued. "Our scientists have made breakthroughs in quantum mechanics and stellar engineering. Our cultural diversity offers unique perspectives that could benefit all member species." Sarah watched the alien delegates as Elena spoke. Some were clearly bored, checking their personal devices or talking quietly among themselves. Others seemed amused by humanity's modest accomplishments. A few appeared openly dismissive, making gestures that didn't require translation to understand. Ambassador Corvin stood when Elena finished. "If I may address the Council," he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "While the human presentation is enthusiastic, I must question what they actually bring to our Federation. Their technology is centuries behind our least advanced members. Their military consists of chemical-fueled ships with projectile weapons. They have no significant trade relationships beyond their own system." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Sarah felt her jaw tighten as she listened to the casual dismissal of everything humanity had achieved. "Furthermore," Corvin continued, "humans have a documented history of warfare and aggression. Their planet has seen countless conflicts, many, over resources that our technology could provide in abundance. Do we really want to admit a species that solves problems through violence?" The delegate from the ethereal conclave, a being that looked like living mist, spoke in a voice like wind through chimes. "Perhaps they could serve as a cautionary example. We could study their aggressive tendencies to better understand primitive behavior patterns." Laughter echoed through the hall. Sarah's hands clenched into fists as she watched beings who had never faced real danger mock her species' struggles. A representative from the aquatic Delphani worlds added, "I've reviewed their military history. They fight wars over patches of dirt and drops of oil. Their greatest battles involve thousands of casualties over territories smaller than our city districts. It's almost quaint. More laughter filled the chamber. Elena's face was red with embarrassment and anger. She had spent years preparing for this moment, and it was turning into a comedy show at humanity's expense. The Xerian delegate's crystalline form chimed with amusement. Perhaps we could establish a nature preserve for them. Somewhere they could practice their primitive warfare without disturbing civilized space. Sarah felt something snap inside her chest. 25 years of military discipline warred with a rage that threatened to consume her rational mind. These beings spoke about her species like they were animals in a zoo, completely ignorant of what humans were truly capable of. High Counselor, Vexithera called for order. The floor is now open for formal debate regarding the human application. Are there any additional comments before we proceed to vote? Sarah looked around the hall at the faces of beings who commanded starfleets and controlled sectors of space. They had made up their minds before the hearing even began. Humanity would be rejected, probably permanently, based on the prejudices and assumptions of species that had never truly been tested. That was when Ambassador Corvin delivered the final insult. "I propose we table this application indefinitely," he announced. "Perhaps in a few centuries, when humans have evolved beyond their current primitive state, they might be worth reconsidering. Until then, they can serve as an interesting case study in early spacefaring development." The hall erupted in sounds of approval. Delegates from across the galaxy voiced their agreement with Corvin's assessment. Sarah watched Elena's shoulders slump in defeat as years of diplomatic work crumbled around them. But Sarah Martinez had not come to the edge of known space to watch her species be humiliated by beings who had forgotten what courage meant. She had stories to tell, truths to share, and a point to make that would change how every creature in this room viewed humanity forever. She stepped forward from the observer section, her military boots ringing against the crystal floor like hammer strikes. The sound cut through the noise of alien voices, drawing attention from across the massive hall. "I have something to say," Sarah announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded troops under fire. High Counselor, Vexithera turned toward her, energy crackling around her form. The observer section was not granted permission to address this assembly. Sarah continued walking toward the center of the hall, ignoring the security drones that began moving from their wall positions. "I don't need your permission to speak. The truth." The entire chamber fell silent. In all their recorded history, no observer had ever broken protocol like this. Sarah reached the center of the hall and turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates from every corner of the galaxy. "You want to know what humanity brings to your Federation?" she asked, her voice now carrying to every corner of the massive space. "You want to understand what makes us worthy of standing among you? Let me tell you about Titan's Rest." The human response, the name hung in the air like a physical presence. Sarah watched as the casual amusement on alien faces began to shift to something else. Several delegates exchanged glances, and she could see recognition dawning in their eyes. Good, they remembered. Titan's Rest was a mining station in the Kepler sector, Sarah continued, her voice steady and strong. Population, 80,000 beings from 23 different species. They were extracting rare elements from the asteroid field, providing materials that every civilization in this room depends on for their technology. High Counselor Vexithera's energy form flickered with interest. "Colonel Martinez, you are out of order. Return to your designated area immediately." "No," Sarah said simply. "I think it's time this council heard about the day your primitive humans saved every life in that station while your advanced civilizations did absolutely nothing." A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. Several delegates were now leaning forward in their seats, no longer looking bored or dismissive. Sarah pulled a small recording device from her uniform pocket. It was scarred and dented, obviously, having survived some terrible ordeal. 3 years ago, every species represented in this room received the same emergency transmission. I have it right here if you'd like to hear it again. She activated the device and a terrified voice filled the hall. It spoke in the universal trade language, broken and desperate. "This is Station Commander Veltar of Titan's Rest. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. They appeared without warning and are systematically destroying our defenses. We have civilians, families, children. Please, anyone who receives this transmission, we need immediate assistance. Our shields are failing. They're breaking through the outer hull. Someone, anyone, please help us. The recording continued with sounds of explosions and screaming voices in multiple languages. Sarah let it play for 30 seconds before switching it off. The silence that followed was deafening. 80,000 beings, Sarah repeated. Men, women, children, elders from nearly 24 species. All sending out desperate calls for help while their homes burned around them. She looked directly at Ambassador Corvin. The Saurix Empire received those transmissions. Your military command classified the situation and filed it under acceptable losses. Too risky to engage unknown hostiles for the sake of a remote mining station. Corvin's scales darkened, but he said nothing. Sarah turned to the ethereal conclave representative. Your people debated the moral implications for 6 hours while the station died. Very philosophical. I'm sure the families trapped in the collapsing sectors appreciated your thoughtful consideration. The misty being's form wavered uncomfortably. The Zarian Consortium ran cost-benefit analyses. Sarah continued, addressing the crystalline delegates. You determined that the strategic value of the station didn't justify risking your crystal ships. Very logical, very calculated, very wrong. She walked closer to the center of the assembly, her voice growing stronger. One by one, every member of your precious Federation found reasons not to act. Too dangerous, too expensive, too risky. Not our responsibility. Let someone else handle it. The hall was completely silent now. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed muted. Humanity received the same transmissions, Sarah said. We had exactly 6 ships in range. Not 6 fleets, not 6 battle groups. 6 ships total. Our entire patrol force for that sector was 1 heavy cruiser, 3 destroyers, and 2 supply vessels. We were outgunned, outnumbered, and operating at the absolute limit of our supply lines. She paused, looking around the room at faces that were no longer laughing. Our military command ran the same calculations your people did. 0 probability of success, certain destruction of our forces, no strategic value to justify the mission. They ordered our ships to withdraw to defensive positions around human colonies. Ambassador Corvin leaned forward. Then how did humans respond to this impossible situation? Sarah smiled grimly. We ignored our orders. Captain Maria Santos of the ESF Defiant took command of the patrol group and gave the only order that mattered. We're going in. She activated her recording device again, playing a different transmission. This time it was a human voice, calm and determined. Titans rest, this is Captain Santos of the Earth Stellar Forces. We're coming to get you. Hold on. 6 ships against an enemy fleet that had already overwhelmed the station's defenses, Sarah continued. No backup, no support, no hope of survival. But Captain Santos knew something that apparently your advanced civilizations have forgotten. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of delegates who were now hanging on her. Every word. Sometimes doing what's right matters more than calculating what's safe. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she continued the story. The battle lasted 18 hours. The enemy had 12 heavy warships and twice as many fighters. They were using weapons technology we'd never seen before. Energy barriers that absorbed our projectiles. Beam weapons that cut through our armor like paper. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing burn scars that covered her forearm. I was Captain Santos's tactical officer. These scars came from a plasma conduit that exploded when enemy fire breached our bridge. We lost life support 3 times during the battle. Our weapons ran out of ammunition, our engines were failing. The alien delegates listened in complete silence as Sarah painted a picture of desperate courage in the face of overwhelming odds. The Defiant was the first to go down. Captain Santos rammed her ship into their flagship to give the rest of us a chance. Before she died, she transmitted one final order to the remaining vessels. Save them all. Sarah's voice never wavered, but her eyes showed the pain of remembering fallen comrades. We held the line for 18 hours while our transport ships evacuated every single person from that station. 80,000 beings. We lost 4 ships and 3,000 of our people, but we got everyone out. Every last civilian, every child, every elderly being who couldn't fight. We saved them all. She paused, looking directly at High Counselor Vexithera. Would you like to know why this story matters to your council today? The ancient being's energy form pulsed with curiosity. Please continue, Colonel Martinez. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since entering the hall, it was a genuine expression of warmth. Because many of the beings we saved that day were family members of delegates sitting in this very room. A shocked gasp rippled through the assembly. Several aliens began looking around frantically. Sarah pointed to a section of crystalline beings. Veltar of the mining station. He's Counselor Zexhi's youngest son. The human primitives pulled him out of a collapsed habitat module while enemy fire was tearing the station apart. The crystalline delegates' form began glowing brighter, pulsing with emotional energy. The Delphani medical team that was treating wounded civilians. Sarah continued. Dr. Marana is sitting right there in your aquatic section. She's alive today because a human marine named Rodriguez carried her to safety through 3 kilometers of burning corridors. The aquatic delegate's tentacles curled with recognition and emotion. Sarah turned to another section of the assembly. The ethereal children who were trapped in the education center when the hull breached. 37 young beings who would have died in the vacuum of space. They're alive because Sergeant Chen sealed the breach with her own body, holding the Yao emergency patch in place until rescue teams could reach them. She died so they could live. Now aliens throughout the hall were making sounds of distress and recognition. Many were frantically checking their personal communicators, probably trying to contact family members they hadn't thought about in years. Every being we pulled off that station is breathing today because humanity decided their lives mattered, Sarah said, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive hall. Not because it was profitable, not because it was safe, not because it advanced our political interests, because it was right. She walked closer to Ambassador Corvin's elevated seat. You want to know what humans bring to your Federation? We bring the knowledge that civilization isn't measured by the size of your fleet or the power of your weapons. It's measured by what you're willing to sacrifice for those who can't protect themselves. The Saurix ambassador's yellow eyes were fixed on Sarah, no longer showing disdain but something that might have been respect. Your species have had thousands of years to develop advanced technology, Sarah continued. You've built incredible starships and weapons that can crack planets. You've created art and philosophy and scientific achievements that humble our greatest minds. She paused, looking around the room at beings who represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. But in all those thousands of years, you've forgotten the most important lesson of all. Power without compassion is meaningless. Strength without courage is worthless, and wisdom without action is just empty words. High Counselor Vexithara's energy form was now pulsing with intense activity. Colonel Martinez, are you claiming that humanity is superior to the member species of this Federation? Sarah shook her head. Not superior. Different. You've all become so advanced, so comfortable, so insulated from real danger that you've lost touch with what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. She gestured toward the observer section where she had been forced to stand. You denied me a seat because you think humans haven't earned the right to sit among you. But I would argue that many of you haven't earned the right to call yourselves civilized. The hall erupted in sounds of outrage and protest, but Sarah's voice cut through the noise like a laser. When those 80,000 beings were dying, when they needed someone to stand between them and destruction, where were your mighty fleets? Where was your advanced technology? Where was your galactic civilization? The protests died away as the truth of her words hit home. Humanity may use primitive, chemical rockets and crude projectile weapons, Sarah said. But when innocent lives were at stake, we were the ones who showed up. We were the ones who fought. We were the ones who bled and died so that others could live. She looked directly at Vexthara. You want to vote on whether humanity deserves membership in your Federation? I suggest you ask the 80,000 beings who are alive today because humans refuse to abandon them. Ask them if we've earned our place among the stars. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah could see that her words had fundamentally changed how these beings viewed humanity. The mockery and dismissal were gone, replaced by something else entirely. Ambassador Corvin was the first to speak. His voice was quiet, lacking the arrogance that had characterized his earlier comments. Colonel Martinez, I owe you and your species an apology. We have misjudged humanity's character. Other voices joined in, delegates from across the galaxy, acknowledging that their preconceptions had been wrong. The crystal beings chimed in harmonies that sounded like admiration. The aquatic races made bubbling sounds that conveyed respect. High Counselor Vexithara raised her hand for silence. The testimony we have heard today changes the nature of our deliberations. It is clear that humanity has already proven their worth through actions rather than words. She turned to address the full assembly. I call for an immediate vote on the human application for Federation membership. All in favor? The response was overwhelming. Lights, sounds, and energy signatures from across the hall indicated unanimous approval. Not a single delegate voted against humanity's admission, but Vexthara wasn't finished. Furthermore, in recognition of humanity's demonstrated commitment to protecting all sentient life, I propose that Earth be granted not just membership, but a permanent seat on the Federation Security Council.